I have now made a video about shadow work. It's going to be a very useful video. But I realized that before I upload it, I'm going to talk a little bit about the techniques that are being shared in that video. They are pretty simple, but for you to really master it, you're going to have to understand what it is you're actually doing. And that is what we're going to talk about now. You see, to really be free in this game will require you to be able to handle the game. You would benefit from being very accomplished when it comes to using your intent on being in the moment, your intent on not giving into things, your intent on being in your source energies, and to really be able to have great accomplishment within those things. You need to make that choice. When you have made that choice, you're going to get there, but you will have to practice. And we're now going to talk about the 3-step process. Of course, it starts with happy now. That is the life you want to experience. You don't want to be weighed down with low frequency mindsets or irritations, sadness, any type of other experiences than happy here and now. I think if you ask yourself what you really want, then eventually, at least, you're going to come to that realization. You want to be free. You don't want to dabble where you shouldn't. You don't want to be overwhelmed or sad or negative. So step number 1 is simply to just be happy. And if you can't be happy, like I said, it is because you have a shadow and it must be dealt with. And we're now going to talk about the second step in being free. You have to understand that if you aren't experiencing happiness here and now, it is because you are experiencing a shadow. We call it a shadow. Whatever it should be that is not happy here and now is a shadow. We have so many names for it now. It could be a low frequency mindset. It could be something annoying. It could be a cloud. Call it whatever you want. If you aren't present here and now in the moment, you're experiencing a shadow. And for you to be able to deal with it, you need to come to terms with the fact that we have shadows. That is totally fine. You don't want to fight it. You also don't want to push it away or fool yourself and tell yourself that you don't have a shadow. If there is something there, you would benefit from rather dealing with it appropriately. And we will revert back and talk a bit more in depth on each of these 3 steps, but I'm just going to mention now that you really don't want to give into it. The shadow is not you. The shadow is something that you are observing, experiencing, but you're not connected to it. You can observe it as if it wasn't a part of yourself. This is very important. To not give into it, don't take it in. You simply just observe it. Now, step number 3 in this process of dealing with a shadow is going to be familiar with your source self connection. You're going to learn to recognize the neutral light in the core of your head, in the center of your head, and you're going to learn to simply just focus on it. If you were to observe a shadow, then you leave the shadow be. You leave it where it is. You don't do anything about it. You might somewhat feel the shadow, experience it, but you don't panic. You don't give in. You don't judge yourself. And as the shadow is existing wherever it should exist, you are rather focusing on your source self connection. You're choosing to boost it if you can. And for you to really master this part of this process, you need somewhat of a good source self connection. If you still haven't been able to recognize the infinite light in the core of you, then practice. Simply choose to be someone who can experience it, someone who recognizes it. And we're going to talk more about that soon. But you see, essentially, you want to be able to go through your day and deal with whatever pops up on the go. You don't want it to take weeks. You don't want to have to lay down to deal with shadows. You want to have such a high frequency approach, way of dealing with it, that you can just do it on the go. And you will see that this technique of shadow work is really the key to all types of clarity that you might want to gain. It is much bigger than you might think. If you can really master this, then you can gain any type of freedom, any type of clarity, because you see, you have everything within you. You have the clarity. And if you aren't experiencing the clarity in any given situation, in regards to whatever it should be, then it is because you have a shadow. Your avatar is caught up in an illusion about that thing or a blockage. If you can deal with that shadow, you will see that you have the answer within you. And this might all maybe sound a little advanced or a little complicated. It is a little advanced. It isn't something that you necessarily master right away. But if you recognize that you genuinely want to be free, you genuinely want to have the ability to function as you should, to be able to deal with things on the go, to be able to deal with it efficiently, then you're going to need a technique that is as close to the truth as possible, as close to simplicity as it gets. And that is what you have right here. We're going to talk a lot more about it. But you will have to practice. And you can practice at any time. You can really scan your mind. If you find anything that is upsetting you or triggering you, you can use this technique and you will overcome it right away, especially if you practice a little bit. So essentially, you could say that what we are learning here is to not give in to things. All sorts of things would be shadows. Any type of thing that could annoy you or upset you or throw you off or make you emotional is something that you should not give into. If you want to understand that shadow and see through it and have clarity about it, then that is something you can do with this technique. But I'm not saying that you always should. Of course, with some things, you would benefit to really understand why you are experiencing that shadow. It could be in regards to blockages in your own life. But when it comes to conspiracy theories or people, whatever it should be, it's not necessarily something to waste your time on. So, do you want to be able to deal with any shadow on the go? If you really do, then make a choice to be able to get to that type of accomplishment. We're now going to talk a little bit more about it. So of course, first and foremost, there are no shadows. You're just free. You're happy here and now, and you enjoy your life. You do the things you want to do, and life is great. It is only if you cannot experience this that you will have to deal with a shadow. If you can't experience that type of happiness here and now, then you have a shadow. And that is totally fine. That is totally understandable. And if you can be totally fine with having that shadow, and by shadow, I can mean so much. It's any type of stress in your body, any type of depression, hopelessness, anything else than completely pumped and happy here and now. You don't need to be overly excited, but you know what it's like to really be happy, to be content, to look around without any judgment, and to be fine, to love life, and to love yourself. That is what you want to experience. That is the best state of being. And like I said, if you can't do that, then it is because you have a shadow. It is often just one. It is one thing on your mind, here and now, and it must be dealt with. We have now almost dealt with it. We are going to talk about step 3 of this process now. And it is here that the shadow will dissolve. It will dissolve and disappear, and you will be back to happy now. So again, are you in that place of happiness right now? If you aren't, or if you have anything else on your mind, any type of shadow, then we can try to deal with that now. First and foremost, I want you to accept it for what it is. It's right there, don't give into it, hold it with an open hand. You can definitely take 10 minutes out of your day to not feed into it, to simply just accept living this life while having that shadow in your presence. And if you can let go of it like that and simply be fine with it, then we are now going to do step number 3. Now, as you recognize the shadow, you don't necessarily need to know what it is, but you recognize that there is something there that is not making you feel good. It is maybe making you feel a little depressed or not at ease, maybe stressed. As you can observe this, I want you now to put your attention, your focus on your source self connection. Simply just stay aware of your source self connection, the light in the core of your being. And as you do that, you're going to be totally fine with the shadow dissolving. You can visualize the shadow dissolving piece by piece and disappearing. And this can happen relatively quickly, but you don't want to be in a hurry. You're patient. You can definitely let it take whatever amount of time it needs. You're fine regardless. This is very important, to not stress about it. Don't be in a hurry. It's going to take whatever amount of time it will take, and you're fine with it. But yeah, you now keep your focus, your attention on your source self connection. You can visualize the light, source light, in the core of your head, and simply just stay there as you visualize the shadow dissolve. And you can put a little pillar spin on it if you want, and see how the shadow is simply just turning into nothing and disappearing, how you sling it out to the sides. And at some point, it can take 1 second, can take half a minute, can take a little longer, but yeah, at some point you're going to be back to happy now. Happy now is a way of life. It's a mindset, it's a state of being, but it is something that you have chosen. And you choose to live like that. It will take a certain level of maturity to go from being someone that didn't even recognize this as a choice in life, or even a possibility, to being someone who consciously really actually makes that choice. You know, at some point you just realize that giving into those illusions is never going to make you happy. It's just not the way. And if you have realized that now, then you can be very successful in truly being happy. But you have to deal with the shadows. If anything is popping up, or holding you back, then you must recognize that it is your responsibility to deal with it. And you can always deal with it, no matter what type of shadow it is. Anything, everything. And it can happen very successfully within the next few moments. It really can. You will be surprised when you practice this technique how very quickly your life can change. If you can just recognize if you aren't necessarily fully in the moment and happy, recognize if there is something bothering you, and then take responsibility to deal with it. You're probably going to get surprised many times. It's kind of an awakening phase where you recognize the type of power you have over your happiness. So let's run through it again. Happy now. If you aren't happy now, if something is upsetting you, then observe that thing. Allow it to exist, don't push it away, it's totally fine. Now put your attention on your source self-connection. And if you're still struggling with that, then visualize. Visualize something that is source, and it is the source light, and it is in the center of your head, and it is the real you. That's what you tell yourself. That's where you put your attention. And visualize the shadow dissolving. Put a little pillar spin on it and see it dissolve. Now, of course, you're back to happy now. Always happy now. If something is popping up, put your attention on your source self-connection. Don't push the shadow away. See it dissolve. You're back to happy now. Just understand that nothing is worth giving into. Nothing. If you need a solution, you will definitely not find it by giving into that thing. You will find it from your source self-connection. And of course, that is another part of this 3-step technique that we talked about now. You know everything. Deep within, you have all the answers. And if there is anything you need to gain clarity about, whether it should be strategy or choice or truth in regards to you and what you should do or whatever it should be, you have all those answers. And the reason that you aren't necessarily experiencing them is because you are giving into something, and it could be the belief that you're not going to be able to have that type of clarity. And that belief is a shadow. And you can deal with it in the same way that we just talked about. Allow that shadow to exist, don't fight it, put your attention on your source self-connection, let the shadow dissolve, and choose to have clarity about the choice that you wanted to have clarity about. If you practice this, you're going to get a very good source knowing. You're going to practice getting a good source self-connection and to simply be someone who can have the knowing. You will really have to master the source connection, staying in that neutrality, not giving in to the beliefs or the shadows. Don't go there. Don't ever go there. Learn to really not go there. So the video that is being uploaded after this one is essentially about this. It might be very similar. I just felt like going a bit more in depth on each of the 3 steps. But I think you should watch the next video also. If you can be somewhat accomplished in this technique, then you're going to do tremendously well in this game. And if you can really master it, well, then you are going to have a lot of fun. You really can unlock anything, whatever you want. So if you have benefited from this video, kindly consider becoming a supporter. Abundance, health and prosperity to you. Thank you so much.